Good afternoon. Welcome to Economic Matters. Today is Friday, the 13th of March for our, what time is it? 2:30. Bill hearings for this afternoon. We have 9 bills on our docket. Unfortunately, we don't have any of our bill sponsors except for our very own Delegate Wyvil. So if you would like to present your bills 1201 and 1236, we can begin by starting those bills.
Second. Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and honorable members of the Economic Matters Committee. For the record, I am Delegate Wyvil. Please present House Bill 1201. Since the passage of the statewide reserve study requirement, my office has been contacted numerous times over the years regarding the mandate. House Bill 1201 is the product of some of those discussions. The bill creates a carve-out and allows those HOAs and condo associations to choose the manner in which they wish to fund repairs and provide relief in 2 distinct ways. One, it allows a residential condo association by a vote of 80% of the membership to continue to fund repairs through a special assessment and avoid the necessity of conducting a reserve study and associated funding requirements. Or 2, the proposed legislation would exempt a single-family home HOA subdivision that is comprised of 50 or fewer homes and has the responsibility for only road maintenance to be exempt from the reserve study and funding requirements. As you may recall, the impetus for the original legislation was the high-rise building collapse in Florida. The carve-out for number 2 applies only to single-family homes and is far remote from a high-rise building. Many of these condo and HOAs have been in operation for many years and have survived and thrived using special assessments. I do want to bring to your attention on page 6, line 22, that should, it says or, it should be an and, so I've requested an amendment for that. So that one would have to meet all 4 of those requirements to qualify for the exemption under number 2 category. For the fiscal note, the bill has no fiscal impact to state or local government operations, but could have positive and significant impacts on smaller condo associations and HOAs. I thank you for your consideration. Ask for a favorable report on House Bill 1201.
Seeing no questions for you, Delegate Wyvil, and seeing no other witnesses, that concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 1201. We can move on to your 1236.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Vice Chair. Again, Delegate Wyvil presenting House Bill 1236. House Bill 1466 was passed into law during the 2025 legislative session and requires, quote, counties or municipal corporations to adopt a local law authorizing the development of accessory dwelling units on land with a single-family detached dwelling unit as the primary dwelling unit, end of quote. Overall, I personally believe this is a great bill and provides for the utmost respect for any private property rights. However, as with any legislation, there can be some unintended consequences. If you're not familiar with the town of Sharpsburg, it's a small town in Washington County, first laid out in 1763 by Joseph Chaplin as the first town in Washington County. The town was devastated on September 17, 1862, as residents witnessed the bloodiest single day of the Civil War, and in the history of the United States, as 23,110 soldiers were left dead, wounded, or missing during the Battle of Antietam. Town leaders over the years have done an impeccable job in maintaining the town in much the same presence as it existed in the 1800s. This bill makes a technical change to the accessory dwelling unit legislation passed during the 2025 legislative session by adding a second paragraph to the historic property exemption of the original bill by also including the language, quote, property located within a district designated by the applicable local jurisdiction to be of historic significance in accordance with Section 8-105 of the Land Use Article, end of quote. This additional language is enabling legislation which would allow the town of Sharpsburg and others like it within the state of Maryland that are of great historical significance to maintain the historical nature of their towns. I thank you for your consideration and ask for a favorable report on House Bill 1236.
Seeing no questions, Delegate Weigel, and no further witnesses, that concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 1236. I see Delegate Ross has joined us, here to present House Bill 1577.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. And to the members of the committee, it's very nice to be back with you again today. Thank you. So for the record, I'm Delegate Kim Ross, Legislative District 8, and I'm here to request a favorable report on House Bill 1577. This bill is about good governance and housing affordability, two things we really believe in here. I'll recap a little bit about HOAs. I talked in a separate bill hearing about how they function and the role of the boards. So just to briefly recap, homeowners associations and condo associations are often referred to as common ownership communities. They are governed by a board comprised of residents who live in the community, and these individuals have a lot of authority. They can levy taxes or assessments, levy them like taxes, but they're assessments. They can, they manage the finances. They can fine residents for various violations. They can take you to court if you don't pay your assessments, you don't pay the fines. So they have a lot of authority. The biggest responsibility that they have is the management of the finances on behalf of the people who live in the community. Sometimes they get it right and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they mean well and sometimes they do not. In any case, the homeowners have no say in where their assessments go. This bill does not change that, for the most part. What this bill does is says the board will continue to retain that decision-making authority, for good or bad. They would, however, be able to continue to use the assessments for the things that they should be using them for. But alterations in excess of $1,000 must receive majority approval of the homeowners who would be paying for it. To be clear, this bill excludes all alterations that are safety-related, maintenance-related, repair-related, code-related. This bill exempts all of those types of expenses. And I'm open to amending. I've talked with the Community Association Institute about this point. I'm happy if you are wanting to amend that to clarify further that this does include infrastructural upgrades, any maintenance or upgrades necessary to comply with building codes. This bill is not targeting any of those expenses. The board would continue to make all the decisions around when those types of expenses need to be paid. This in no way interferes with the board's ability to make their repairs, maintain the community. As I mentioned, that's all excluded. This is for the fancy-smancy luxury high-end items that will be placed on the backs of the homeowners to pay. This ensures that homeowners are not stuck to pay for pricey features that they do not want and did not ask for. This bill does not affect HOAs and condo associations who are doing things the right way. This bill is for the bad actors, the board members who are trying to, as we say, keep up with the Joneses, and they are not demonstrating fiscal responsibility at the expense of the people who live there. It just shares a little bit of the power with the homeowners. And at a time when people are just trying to figure out how to pay for life, it could not be a more timely bill. As we all know, cost of living is up. Housing and unaffordability is an issue, particularly in HOAs, where homeowners are paying monthly assessments, hundreds of dollars in some cases, many cases, on top of their mortgage. And they're trying to also raise the reserve funds to pay for capital expenses, because we passed a bill, and I talked about this in another hearing, we passed legislation that requires these communities to have a certain amount of money in their reserve funds to be able to pay for capital expenses. So that's another thing that's really caused the homeowners in these communities to pay more money every month than they were paying ever before. And as they should be funding the reserve. So now is exactly the time for us to make sure that on top of all of those expenses, homeowners are not also paying for some board member's expensive taste or poor judgment. Now, the opposition will tell you a couple of things. They may tell you that communities are going to suffer. They're going to fall in ill repair. Repairs will be delayed. That is not true. As I explained, that's all excluded. Repairs, code-related, all excluded. Again, the code requirements, we can clarify that further if you think that's necessary. You don't have to take my word for that. You can just read the bill. There's a clear exemption for repairs. They may also tell you that these individuals making these decisions are elected, that it is their job to retain the decision-making as it relates to finances. They will talk to you probably in a way that sounds like these individuals are much like we are, elected officials, government officials, with fiduciary duty as experts. These are your neighbors. They are typically untrained in most instances. I can say this as someone who has been ahead of one of these communities for years. They're typically doing the best they can with what they know, under-supported. This could be the person in your community who is irresponsible with finances or just has really expensive taste. It could be your HOA president. He's the person, he or she is the person controlling the purse strings. He's got nothing better to do but spend your money. This could be your community. So what this bill is trying to do is rein him in. This is for the expensive digital $30,000 community sign. This is for the expensive fitness center with all new equipment. This is for the really expensive, costly flower beds, flowers flown in from another country, expensive, that the community does not want, did not ask for. These expenses will be placed on the backs of the people who live there. That's who this bill is targeting. That's the behavior this bill is correcting or checking. It is designed to protect homeowners from poor leadership, and in many cases, elections are not being held routinely as they should be. That's all up to the board. If they do the elections, how often they do it, the law dictates it, but they don't always follow that. Some don't even know what the Homeowners Act dictates, due to no fault of their own in some cases. This bill, to be clear, does not ban those kinds of things. If your community wants the fancy-smancy, multi-million-dollar fitness center, they can have it. This board does not stop any of that. It just makes sure that the residents actually want it. These boards can be small. This could be just a few people making these very expensive decisions on your behalf. Opposition may also tell you that this is like taxes. You pay your taxes, you don't get to decide where the taxes go. That is very true. But these are not taxes. This is a totally different situation where these dues have a specific purpose. They are for the operating expenses of the community and the reserves. That's it. That's what the dues are for in any HOA and COA. It's the upkeep of the community. This bill does not target any communities who are doing that. These are mini governments. They are not actual governments. So they're not levying taxes. They don't have, in many cases, the mechanisms in place to hear from constituents in the same way that you do when you're making decisions about taxes. They don't have staff and salaries and an institution behind them to make those decisions, to aid their decision-making in the way that you do as a legislator. I say this because I want to caution you against a parallel that may be made today between HOA members and, say, legislators. It is a totally different situation. These are people in the neighborhood who care about their community. No staff, no salary, no support of an institution, no mechanisms to talk to the community about their needs, their priorities, to help you when you're making those financial decisions. You may also hear today that this is somehow an administrative burden on the boards, that it is extremely difficult to get a majority vote. This bill requires a majority vote from the people who live in the community to make those kinds of alterations. They will tell you that's difficult to do, and I would agree. But what this board does is considers that. The members do not have to be in person for that vote. They do not have to be notified in any specific particular way. That is left intentionally broad, so they can do it by any means. They can attain that majority vote through mail, they can do it by survey, they can do it by email, they can do it in person, they can smoke signal it, they can do whatever to get the majority vote. The point is not to make this a difficult thing to do. We'd like it to be easy to attain. So there's no administrative difficulty with securing this type of vote. Make it a petition, make it a survey on your website. And lastly, you may also hear that we don't need this, that transparency, somehow the budget for the community is always released to the people who live there. That's by law. They have to, you're supposed to send the budget to the community for approval. You may hear today that that's enough transparency. In theory, that may be true. In practice, it is most definitely not. In many cases, HOAs and COAs are not holding regular annual meetings. They are not sending out that budget within the required period of time before those annual meetings. And even if and when they do, the budget, it's not, you may have, for example, a line item that just says landscaping projects. It doesn't list the projects, nor does it have to. It's very high level. So you may know that there is a landscaping project item, but you may not know that that also includes a multi-$1,000 greenhouse that a board member wants to do. You may not know that that's its elaborate community garden that's going to require a lot of cost to keep it up, or maybe there's a way you've got to mitigate infestations. You may not know any of those sorts of things. So the budget is designed to be transparent, but it's not all the transparency one needs to know exactly how those projects, what they are, and how much they cost individually. That's all assuming that that's even on the budget, which also assumes that a budget even went out. So this bill puts some of the power back into the hands of the homeowner. In this tough economic environment, it makes sure that the homeowner's hard-earned dollars do not become monopoly money. It's a little insurance for homeowners that protects them. It makes sure their money is not misused on frivolous, expensive pet projects. It goes to where it's supposed to go. It makes sure that your board is not shopping, and when it's time to pay the check, they come to you to pay for it, on top of your mortgage, on top of your energy bill, on top of your increased cost for grocery and everything else. This legislation does not disrupt repairs or maintenance in any way. It also, the bottom line, it encourages fiscal responsibility, and it makes sure the money goes where it's supposed to go. If they want the other things, they can have it, but the members have to say that they want it. Bottom line, if homeowners have to pay the receipt, they should have a say in the purchase. I strongly urge a favorable report for this bill, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have here today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Delegate Ross. I don't have any questions for you on your bill. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
We do have a virtual favorable signed up. Actually, is not present, so Dr. Blue is not here. Seeing no questions and no further witnesses, thank you very much. That concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 1577.
Thank you.
Delegate Rosenberg, 1549 and 1547, whichever order you want to take it in. Which one are you doing first?
It doesn't matter, we can almost, they're very similar.
Oh,
So they're both
okay.
lead paint.
All right,
but-
you decide.
Okay, 1547, we'll go numerically. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Several decades ago, we reached a compromise on lead paint enforcement in Maryland, and it has had an extraordinarily beneficial effect. The number of children who are being poisoned is significantly down, but there remain situations where this preventable disease is not being prevented because we don't have either the enforcement of these properties are exempt from the law, or there is a delay by statute in providing assistance. That's the second bill. I had a brief encounter with one of the representatives for the landlord community who said, how can you change this grand compromise and that just because this was the agreement 20-some years ago, it shouldn't be changed today. Well, the second bill, 1549, is here because of a change that was made to the law within the last decade. So we have made changes to the compromise of several decades ago, and we would submit that it is appropriate to do so again. What 1547 specifically does is remove the exemption for a single unit property that is not
No, that's 1549.
that is not your typical apartment, but say in a flop house, what would be called in the past a flop house, a unit where a single individual lives, the bathroom is down the hall, that kind of situation. That is exempt from the existing law. Someone could become ill with lead poisoning living in such a unit, but the provisions of law that would otherwise apply if the person was living in a registered apartment unit do not apply, and that's an exemption that we think should be removed from the law, and that's what 1547.
49.
Okay. Fine, sorry, I'm getting my numbers mixed up. That's 1549, but you asked me to go first with 1547. And 1547 would expedite the time frame for an owner to respond when an elevated blood level has been reported. Current law requires that nothing happens until the department does its inspection of the property. And as every one of us knows, there are times when any department, any state or governmental agency isn't as quick to get out to the scene of to do a necessary work. And therefore, the landlord should not be removed from its responsibility to act prior to the government agency doing its part. And that's what 1547 would do. So I would now ask the committee to give serious consideration to both of these bills, 1547 first, and conclude my testimony so that Ruth Ann Norton and staff from who've been working on this issue before I was involved can speak to why these two bills are before us. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, committee and chair. If I may take one point of privilege to thank Delegate Rosenberg for his decades upon decades of work that has resulted in a 99.6% reduction of childhood lead poisoning, returned over $45 billion of economic effort back to the state, but most of all, have allowed us to get kids healthier and ready to learn in the classroom. So I just want to say thank you. And thank you, Chair, for allowing me to do that. I'm Ruth Ann Norton. I am the chair of the Maryland Lead Poisoning Prevention Commission, the chair of Healthy Climate Maryland, and the president and CEO of the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative. I come here in strong support of House Bill 1547. And just in plain speak, to know that I was part of the original team in 1994 that worked on the adoption of Maryland's lead risk reduction in housing law, of which Delegate Rosenberg was the sponsor, and it has set one of the best public health successes in this country. When the law was constructed and throughout the majority of the time of the law being intact, there have been two parts to the law, or three. One, the education and the standards that have to be met at the time of rental. And the second part of that is that during the rental, if chipping, peeling, flaking paint, or other hazards that could poison children, or if a child becomes poisoned during tenancy, that family can use a notice of defect, file for a modified risk reduction. And what effectively occurred in that time, and what we are asking to be restored from a loophole that was created in 2019, is simply this. A child has a blood lead level of 3.5 or above. It would compel the owner to go in, if I may ask for courtesy to just quickly finish, I promise I will. It will quickly, it compels the landlord to go in and do a cursory review of the unit, and if in that they see hazards that are contributing to lead exposure, they then would have to remediate under the standard modified risk reduction standards to do so. What happened in 2019 is owners were able to get a loophole passed into the law, and that waits until MDE would go out and inspect that property when a child has an elevated blood lead level. The danger in that is reflected in testimony that you have on hand from written testimony from Jamila Preston, many other families, including a family in Baltimore about a year and a half ago who moved into a unit with kids with 0 blood lead levels, and during the course of occupancy, their levels went to 97 and 21.
Ms. Norton, if you
and had the owner had to act under the normal standards of the modified risk reduction. And I will say it is not holding the owner responsible for other sources, so that nothing in this, what we're requesting, would get them to be responsible for other sources of lead.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Riley Grace Rochong. I am a family advocate attorney with the Green Healthy Homes Initiative. So just to be clear, the way that the Maryland reduction of lead in housing law currently works is if you're a tenant in a lead-affected property, so that's property built before 1978, there are two main ways that you can get your landlord to address lead hazards in your property. Now, the first is if you as the tenant send a notice of defect to your landlord, or really any person, but typically it's going to be the tenant. That's something that we as an organization, also MDE, will assist people with. Unfortunately, that requires that the tenant already have a decent amount of understanding of how it works, or that they seek out competent counsel who can then help them, so it's not always a perfect remedy. Now, what we're trying to address in this bill is the other circumstance where a tenant can be able to get their landlords to address lead hazards in their property. So under the current law, when a tenant has a person at risk, that's a child or a pregnant woman, test positive for an EBL of 3.5 or higher, then those results are sent to the Maryland Department of the Environment, and then the Maryland Department of the Environment has to then send that notice to the landlord. Now, the issue is that in 2019, we've talked about this a little bit, there was a requirement added that before a landlord actually have to respond and do something in response to getting an actual test result that someone on the property tested positive for lead poisoning, that the Maryland Department of the Environment go out and conduct their required environmental investigation first. Now, the issue is that what this has meant is that even though we are lowering the blood lead level action level in Maryland, which is good, people who test positive for lead poisoning and who have higher levels than before 2019 have to wait even longer than they did before that law was changed back in that year. Again, we would refer you to the written testimony of Jamila Preston, who talked about how she had her children tested in July of last year, and because MDE has not been able to take action, they still have not had their landlord do anything on the property. Therefore, this would fix that kind of a situation, and we would ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking, we have no questions for your panel.
Just quickly on House Bill 1549, the second bill, we are here in favor also on that bill. And I think it just reflects the affordable housing crisis.
Right, I was going to call on House Bill 1549.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. I thought you were telling us. Sorry.
I was saying that there are no further questions and no further panel, well, there are panelists on 1547, but there are no questions for your panel currently. So I will call on the next panel of favorables on 1547, which is Matt Hill.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Matt Hill. I'm an attorney at the Public Justice Center. And I'll say we support this bill. There is no more difficult conversation that I have with my clients than with a mom who has a child and has just been told that her child has an elevated blood lead level. Do they move? Do they break the lease? What about their liability? Where are they going to go, particularly limited income, first month's rent, security deposit? I hope that I would have the financial means to be able to move myself and I wouldn't think about it twice, but most folks don't have that option. And so they are stuck in the property with a child with elevated blood lead level. Now, maybe that doesn't come from the property itself, maybe it does, but where is the harm in just requiring the landlord to come out, make an assessment, and if necessary, make repairs and get a new lead certificate when a child in the property has an elevated blood lead level? That's all this bill does. We'd ask for a favorable report.
Seeing no questions for you, Mr. Hill, thank you very much for your testimony. We'll now move on to the unfavorables, Bill Costelli and Bob Enton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, Robert Enton on behalf of the Maryland Multi-Housing Association. You have our written testimony. I was involved up to my eyebrows in the 1994 legislation. It was one of the most difficult pieces of legislation I've ever worked on in my whole career. And we passed a comprehensive bill to deal with the issue of high blood levels in children. Looking back at the statistics, we probably had in 1994 when the bill passed and went into effect in 96, maybe we had 10,000 children with a blood lead level of 10 or higher. According to the most recent statistics, 2023, they lowered the threshold from 10 deciliters to 3. And even with a lowest blood level of 3, there were a total of 267 children in the entire state with that blood level. Now, here's what the bill does, and it was referred to as that somehow the landlord's got a loophole passed in 2019. Well, I don't think we get loopholes passed. It was a bill, it was introduced, it was heard, and it was passed. And what the bill does is the bill says that you have to have that MDE will come in and inspect that property and determine whether or not the property needs anything. Meantime, you have to, the landlord, even though the landlord had nothing to do with the child's elevated blood level, because the apartment or the house is in perfect condition, the landlord has to go ahead and relocate the tenant pending this further work by a certified repair person. That's not what the law says. What the law says is that MDE will come out and inspect the premises. And if the premises have chipping, peeling, paint, whatever, then you will have to go ahead and comply with this. But when you look at what causes lead poisoning today, lead poisoning is caused by pipes, lead poisoning is caused by water, lead poisoning is caused by foreign foods, and in Baltimore, they had chipping, flaking lead paint dripping down from a bridge over the Jones Falls Expressway. You may have read about that.
Mr. Enton, if you
So
could.
this, I will wrap up, Madam Chair, but I would just tell you, the last point that I will make is that according to MDE, 30 to 40% of the children that have high blood levels have that because of something other than a rental property. So let MDE come and inspect it, and if they say the property needs work, we'll come and do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Bill Castelli on behalf of the Maryland Realtors. I won't repeat what Bob has said, just to point out the fact that all of these properties have met and been inspected at least within the last 2 years and passed the dust test. So concerns that the realtors have is that if you've just passed the dust test and now you have an elevated blood lead level from a child, then you're going to go back and repeat doing all the things that you've just recently done, whether your property is the source of that or not. And as Bob said, apparently 30 to 40% of those situations, when they come out and do an environmental investigation, don't require the property owner to do stuff. So I think that's a concern that we have and why we would encourage an unfavorable report.
We'll begin with Delegate Delegate Weigel, then Delegate Adams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Enton, you did touch on my question a little bit, and you quoted 30 to 40% of outside the home. So if we eliminate the inspections, if that source is from somewhere else, what are we fixing in the home?
You know, I think under the current system that we have today, and what was passed by this General Assembly, when you lower the threshold from 15 to 10 and then down to 3, under that system, if a child has an elevated blood lead, then the MDE comes out and does an inspection. That's what they do. And if it turns out that the property has chipping, flaking, peeling, paint, whatever, MDE is going to then notify the owner, and the owner will have to relocate the tenant and fix the property up.
So
That's
this
the
bill
current
is
system.
really letting MDE off the hook from doing inspections?
So what this would do is MDE wouldn't have to, there wouldn't be any inspection. What this would do would be require the landlord to immediately relocate the tenant, even though there's no finding that there's a problem with the property that caused the lead paint to go up. But to immediately relocate them, go hire a licensed contractor and come in and, you know, inspect the property and whatever, and you're going to pay for it and do whatever has to be
So
done.
that relocation is automatic?
Right. And yes. And the statistics clearly demonstrate that out of the some 400,000 children we have in the state of Maryland, right now, we've got 267 with a blood lead of 3 or higher.
All right. And then I know you said sources, other sources. I used to be on ENT, and actually there was when we were looking at the lead-based paint back then, there was a lady come in, her child was affected. Actually, they determined it wasn't from the home, it was from the dirt that the child was playing in outside the home. So an inspection would reveal or uncover that, I would assume. But do you know, there were, at that time too, I think toys still had lead in toys from China, I think?
Well,
is that still the case?
I would say this, if you go to the Mayo Clinic website, and I have it on my my iPad right here. You go to the Mayo Clinic site, and it lists other sources of lead exposure besides a property: soil, household dust, pottery, toys, cosmetics, herbal and folk remedies, tamarind candy, and a whole laundry list of other sources of higher blood levels that have nothing to do with the rental property.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And Bill, I'm all about clear paths, compliance with laws, and business owners, landlords surely want to comply with lead paint laws. And I think we start with that general principle that when it comes to these sort of things, there's procedure, there's an understanding, their responsibility, and that there's also testing that has to occur. And in that position I'm taking, I assume you agree with that, but my question goes to, are we not taking something that's well understood and easy to comply with and turning it into a complicated, if not unnecessary step that eliminates the role that MDE is supposed to be playing in this role.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to make a clarification because I do think the process is pretty clear. People have been using the process for a long time.
Yep.
But if it's a complaint about if there is a defect on the property, then you know, the statute says that you then have to fix the property. So it's just in instances where there's an elevated lead level, you know, done by a doctor. At that point, you don't know, nothing's been reported on the property, and that's when an environmental investigation would come in. But to your point, that investigation would reveal whether it's property defect, at which point you would have to do the modified risk reduction, or whether, you know, it was some other factor. And they do, you know, a dust wipe test under the environmental investigation and a series of other things as well.
Right. I mean, when I say compliance, I'm saying it through the lens of making it workable. And this borders on feeling not workable. And knowing I'm generally in the business and understand what it takes to do some abatement and or modifications under the rules, to simply say based on a claim that somebody has heightened lead in their blood that we're immediately going to go through an exercise not only feels unworkable, it just there's a fairness component to this. I understand the health and safety part, but we already have this under law, and I don't believe that there's going to be a lot of testimony saying that we need to change this, but for the fact maybe MDE feels like they can't do it fast enough or can't do their job, and maybe I should say that and not you, but it feels like this bill, what it's trying to solve is not a better health policy, but rather solve a deficiency in how the agency does these things. You may or may not agree, but I'll let you answer if you wish.
Yeah, I mean, if it is a problem and delay, I can't speak to that, but I would agree that it's a different problem. But.
Right.
Yeah, this is not broken and doesn't need to be fixed.
That's another way to put it. Thank you. All right.
Seeing no further questions, thank you for your testimony
Thank
this
you.
afternoon. Seeing no further witnesses, that concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 1547. Delegate Rosenberg, House Bill 1549. Your second bill of the day.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the same issue, really, is
He asked for 47 first, so now we're on 49.
15, are we going to leave certain people out of the equation in terms of the prevention and the intervention that is mandated by the law for others similarly situated, other than for children who get sick, whether they're in a single room residence or whether they're in an apartment unit. If you're in an apartment unit, you are exempted from the existing law. And I don't think there's no public policy reason why a child who is in such a unit facing the risks and the lifelong damage to their well-being from being poisoned by lead should not get the protections of another child who lives in a slightly better unit. And either I or the committee can consult with MDE to find out, both on the previous bill and here, what evidence is there of lead poisoning being reported in children who live in single-room units, and so that we can make a reasoned judgment based on the evidence as to whether this law should be changed. I urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Ruth Ann Norton from the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative. We come in support of this bill too, and apologies for the confusion on prior. It's not my day job to come here a lot, so I apologize. This is just a reflection of our economy and affordable housing crisis that we find ourselves in. Lower income families are increasingly having, because of cost, moving into smaller one-room dwelling units. This extension of need is shown in the case management of lead-poisoned children and their families. We are seeing this happen much more frequently, and the families who are living in one-room units do not have the protections of the law, and kids are being poisoned in these and being exposed in these circumstances. So this would simply extend out for those families living in one room pre-1978 dwelling units, and it does not, include or bring in things like dormitories or non-residential, fully residential units. And if I may, Chair, just for the record, as the chair of the Lead Commission, 84% of children in the state of Maryland are poisoned by lead paint. We have had 0 children in the history of our childhood lead registry, which is sponsored by the CDC at the state of Maryland, 0 poisoned by water. There are scattered numbers of other contributing elements of poisoning, but the preponderance of children are poisoned by paint. They face this hazard in the single dwelling units, and it's applicable to the last bill we discussed as well.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. Again, Riley Grace Rochong on behalf of the Green Healthy Homes Initiative, here in support of House Bill 1549. To reiterate briefly, this expands the coverage of Maryland's reduction of lead in housing law to include single-room units. We believe that this is a relatively straightforward bill. We would especially refer you to the fiscal and policy note, which shows that specifically MDE estimates that this would cover an estimated 37,500 units that are not currently covered under Maryland law, but where there are valid landlord-tenant relationships and there are likely issues of chipping and peeling paint, or at least they would be lead-affected properties, that being built before 1978. We believe that this is especially necessary nowadays with the affordable housing crisis, with people looking for more affordable alternatives for housing situations. And we especially would refer you to the written testimony of one of the tenants who actually reached out to us and who we were not able to assist because of the limitation of this law, that being the testimony of Ms. Julia Rollins. You'll see in her testimony, she rented a single room in a house that was built in 1967. And because of the fact that her property or her rental unit is not covered under lead law, she isn't able to get her landlord to address those issues of chipping and peeling paint on her property. She's not able to get them to address those lead hazards. This is a common sense solution to especially reflect the changing times and the economy. And to add a cherry on top, it's also fiscally responsible because the fiscal and policy note shows that this would result in a net increase of revenue for the special fund that funds the lead poisoning prevention program in Maryland of a net $1 million for the next fiscal year. For these reasons and others, we'll refer you to our written testimony. We ask for a favorable report on House Bill 1549. Thank you.
Before I take a question, I just had a quick clarifying. You made a comment, Ms. Rochong, on the fiscal note. What did you say about the fiscal note?
Yes, according to the fiscal note, not only is MD, according to data from the Maryland Department of the Environment, they're estimating that should this law go into effect, that it would result in registrations from an estimated 37,500 rental units that are not currently registered.
Okay. I was looking at a net effect on the fiscal summary, so, okay. We were looking at 2 different things. Okay, thank you. Delegate Weigel?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Of the 267 cases of EBLs, how many of them apply to this situation?
We wouldn't have that data, but we can get that data from we can ask MDE to provide that data to you.
Okay, thanks.
I mean, part of the issue also.
Seeing no further questions, thank you very much. We will move on to, let's see here, this 1549. We have one more favorable, Mr. Matt Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Matt Hill. I'm an attorney with the Public Justice Center, and I'll be brief. Just to reiterate that, when I started 18 years ago, I'm not quite sure I would have understood the necessity of this bill. But that was when it was mostly single adults paying $400, $500 a month for a room in a rooming house. And unfortunately, affordable housing is so scarce then now I am seeing more and more of my clients, usually single mothers with a child, maybe two, renting a room in a rooming house for $600, $700, $800 a month. These are folks in very vulnerable situations. They have nowhere else to go. This is the housing of last resort. And so at times we see some of our worst landlord actors in this business of renting rooming houses. And so my clients who have children in the rooming houses with no place else to go also have no remedy when there is chipping and peeling lead paint in that house. This bill fixes that very specific problem for a very vulnerable population. We ask for a favorable report.
Seeing no questions for you, Mr. Hill, thank you very much for your testimony this afternoon. Seeing no other witnesses, that concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 1549. Delegate Grammer, here to present House Bill 1550.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll get started when you're ready. Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Delegate Robin Grammer to present House Bill 1550, the Property Rights Protection Act. House Bill 1550 repeals the eminent domain and condemnation authority of the state. Little has been said this session about the Marylanders who are about to lose property rights due to the failed energy policies advanced in Maryland. Having destroyed massive portions of our base energy generation and having driven costs higher with policies like the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, Maryland has positioned itself to increasingly be a net importer of energy. Instead of generating energy locally, we must now create or enhance transmission lines through many northern parts of the state. It is an injustice that our policy failures are resulting in the loss of property, much of which has been passed down through families for generation. House Bill 1550 strikes this authority, and as Marylanders are about to lose property due to policy failures here in Annapolis, we should act quickly to protect their property rights. Thanks for the opportunity to present House Bill 1550. I'd be happy to take questions, and I'd ask for a favorable.
Seeing no questions, Delegate Grammer, thank you very much
Thank you,
for your
Madam Chair.
testimony this afternoon. Seeing no further witnesses, that concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 1550. We'll now move on to House Bill 1538. Delegate Miller.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Economic Matters Committee. For the record, I am Delegate April Miller, and I am here to present House Bill 1538, also known as the Maryland Generational Housing Act. While this is technically a land use bill, at its heart, it's a family bill. It addresses one of the most pressing crises facing Maryland families today, the missing middle of housing that makes it nearly impossible for our families to stay together as they grow and age. The median income, according to the National Association of Realtors, the median age for first-time home buyers rose to 38, up from the age of 35 in 2023 and from the late 20s in the 1980s. The average house price in Maryland is $420,762. The first-time home buyer has a household income of around $97,000, reflecting a $26,000 increase over 2 years. In 2024, first-time buyers made up just 24% of all home buyers, the lowest share since tracking began in 1981. The median down payment amount for first-time buyers is 9%, the highest since 1997. And 91% of first-time buyers financed their home. 25% used a gift or a loan from family or friends to help fund that down payment. And in the 2025 Housing Needs Assessment, DHCD projected Maryland will require 590,186 new housing units by 2045. ADUs play a crucial role in addressing the affordable housing crisis by providing a range of benefits. Maryland families are currently caught between a rock and a hard place. Take my family. We lost my dad in 2022 unexpectedly. My mom still lives in the house we grew up in. Downsizing in Maryland would actually end up costing her money, but it is a lot of house for her to take care of. I want her to be able to be with family, but to make an ADU under current law would be very expensive. Or my daughter and her young family will probably not be able to afford to buy a house when they move back here, but an external ADU on our property would be perfect for their small family. With this bill, we would be able to have 4 generations living by each other, supporting each other, talk about affordable housing. Parents in Frederick County and across the state are struggling to care for aging parents while simultaneously supporting young adult children who cannot afford to leave the nest due to the skyrocketing rents. Traditional assisted living can cost upwards of $5,000 to $8,000 a month. For many families, an ADU is the only affordable way to keep a parent, grandparent out of a home and close to their grandchildren. We talk about the child care crisis constantly. Often the best solution is having a qualified family member, a grandparent, a sibling living on site. This bill removes the bureaucratic red tape that prevents families from taking care of their own. It creates a statewide standard for accessory dwelling units with specific protections for families. It would require local jurisdictions to allow at least one internal and external ADU on single-family lots, regardless of density limits that currently prevent a mother-in-law suite from being built. That is the core of this bill's family focus, that it provides also a property tax exemption for ADUs that are occupied by a qualified family member, defined in the bill as a parent, grandparent, child, grandchild, or sibling. And it also prohibits utility companies from charging excessive capacity fees for ADUs occupied by family members and exempts these units from development excise taxes and impact fees. We often hear that it takes a village to raise a child or care for an older parent. House Bill 1396 allows Marylanders to build that village on their own property. It incentivizes generational housing. We reduce the burden on our state's social safety nets, decrease the demand for subsidized senior housing, and provide a pathway for young families to build wealth and stability. This bill is about freedom to use your property to take care of the people you love. It is about making Maryland a place where family-friendly is a reality, not just a slogan. I urge a favorable report on House Bill 1538. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman and Vice Chair and the rest of the Economic Matters Committee. My name is Andrea Maxey, and I am in favor of House Bill 1538. 2.5 years ago, my husband passed away unexpectedly and suddenly. Shortly after that, my daughter, son-in-law, and their 3 children had a financial crisis due to a job loss and had to move in with me. As I'm approaching my 60th birthday, it makes sense to me to think about my needs in the future. Plus, it's nice to have help with yard work and the house repairs my husband would have taken care of. Multi-generational living has many benefits besides the extra help with household chores. I get to help pour into my grandchildren who have struggled with the loss of both their grandfathers within a few short weeks of each other. This bill would help greatly in enabling me to create my own space, especially as grandchildren are entering the teen years, and making it more affordable. I'm also in that position of having a widowed mother and not knowing what her future health needs might be. While she is in great health now, we all know how quickly that can change. This bill would help her to stay in her own home while allowing for an affordable caregiver space for myself or another family member. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. We'll start with Delegate Weibel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hey, Delegate, thanks for the bill. One question. So House Bill 1466, which was passed last year, required counties to allow accessory dwelling units. Other than the tax components of this bill, how is it, what additional requirements are being made for ADUs?
So it would allow, so I think.
We only get 10 seconds.
Is that it? All right, good. All right, there we go. Next question. So in the legislation that we passed, I believe they're still developing some of those plans for ADUs. I think the counties each have to develop their own. And I was actually pleasantly surprised, February 19th of 2026, Frederick County actually completed their housing needs assessment for affordable housing, and they have a whole strategic plan, and ADUs is a big piece of it. But it's also about, like I said, the utility hookups, the impact fees, the taxes, all of that is what's very cost prohibitive for building an ADU. And like I said, it's an internal and an external would both be allowed.
So this is adding an internal unit,
You can add an internal and an external.
but the external wasn't that covered by 1466?
The external would be more covered under that, and counties are supposed to be developing their guidelines around that, yes.
Okay, and then we have the tax component.
Yes.
Okay, all right, good
Yes.
deal, thanks.
Delegate Adams?
Thank you. Real quickly, what is an interior dwelling unit in the sense that,
Yes.
I understand an exterior ADU or, what is that?
So interior would be where, so like we were going to refinish our basement a couple years ago. There are very specific designations around it. If you put in a full kitchen, that will make it more like a mother-in-law suite, and it significantly increases your, all of your impact fee as far as your taxes, your property taxes. It significantly increases all of those fees.
So by having a bill like this, are you implying that that's not allowed under,
No, it would be allowed.
no, I'm talking about under current law.
Under current law, it's allowed, it's just very, very expensive. It's very cost prohibitive to do that. If I did that for my mom, then it would cost a significant more amount of money for my family each month.
Oh, okay, so you've got some financial or tax incentives in this bill that?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, because isn't it true, because I have a basement, I'm looking at putting a summer kitchen in there, because my mom's getting older. So isn't it true, essentially, as I'm moving forward with this process I'm learning, isn't it true that as you're going through and you're putting in sinks, you're putting in plumbing, you're putting in a shower, these are all different impact fees that are separate and distinct, but you can be charged for each one.
Yes, and
And it's tens of thousands, because the sink might be 5,000 as an impact. The shower might be 2,000, and the county chooses how much of those they want to charge you, and it could be all of them, quite frankly. So it could be like $10,000.
At least, and then the impact on your overall taxes and your property taxes in
Yes.
general is
Yes.
astronomical. Yes.
Okay. Well,
Makes
thank
it
you.
makes it unaffordable.
Yes, thank you for the bill. And especially given the aging population that we have, I really appreciate the bill.
Yeah, and it's focused on family. That's what the bill's on. It's not about doing an Airbnb. It's not about when you will lose the protections when you sell your house, then the property value would reset at the higher rate because of all the additions that you have done.
It's my understanding, I don't know, maybe you can speak on this, that in some cases, when you buy or you're gonna like upgrade, you're gonna put in like a room above the garage.
Yeah.
You actually, in some cases, have to sign saying that you will not use it as
Yeah,
as
an Airbnb or something along those
Yes.
lines. And
Yeah.
also where we are on septic, and that makes right now, what we have as far as any kind of permitting around some of the septic is just, it's actually kind of confusing. We have a lot of different regulations around it, and people have been really hurt and not been able to either build a certain size house or been able to do these, the ADUs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Seeing no further questions, Delegate Miller, excuse me, and no further witnesses, thank you for your testimony. That concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 1538. Colleagues, it turns, I'm sorry. I don't have you signed up. Was this 1538? Yeah, it should be. I apologize, you are signed up. I was too eager. Are you Mr. Clements?
That's me.
Okay. My apologies.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Mark Clements. I serve as the Maryland Policy Manager for Greater Washington, a nonprofit focused on housing, land use, and transportation issues in the Greater Washington, D.C. region and beyond. We enthusiastically support House Bill 1538. The committee has often heard from me and many others that our state is experiencing a housing crisis that will require a variety of creative solutions. We believe the Generational Housing Act is one such solution. This legislation enables individuals to exercise their power as property owners by using their own land to accommodate additional family members. This bill also provides financial relief for those housing a qualified family member in the form of property tax abatements and streamlined utility charges. According to U.S. Census data, Maryland currently ranks 5th in the nation for the largest number of multi-generational households, or in other words, households occupied by 3 or more generations of the same family. That same data shows that over a third of the state's adults aged 18 to 34 still live with their parents. For some families, those arrangements are desired. For others, they're out of necessity. This legislation provides more flexibility to both sets of circumstances. We believe the Generational Housing Act of 2026 builds upon the work of last year's ADU law in a meaningful way. It provides countless small opportunities to expand housing availability and affordability throughout the state, and we urge the committee to give it a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clements. We have a question from Delegate Howard.
Aware of the statistic in Maryland that 29% of the 6.1 million Marylanders will be over 65 by 2030? Were you aware of that number?
I was not aware, but it's not a surprising one.
It's a huge number.
Yes.
Huge number. So, okay, thank you very much.
Seeing no further questions, Mr. Clements. No more questions for you, and I apologize for my mistake. Seeing no other questions and no further witnesses, now that concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 1538. Colleagues, House Bill 1548 has been withdrawn, so we are done with bill hearings for this afternoon. We are adjourned.